Oh, well, I mean, it'll be as great as we can make it, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
All right, welcome everyone. We are the Reboot. Um, Jim has decided to step down. He's got a couple other things that he works on. He runs a couple other podcasts, and it does take some time to put these things together. And hoping he'll be on here, from time to time as as a guest or participant or whatever. He's still in our marketing group, so we still there's nothing, no bad blood anywhere. This is just a change that needed to be made. We are the Reboot, and I am Brian Bradtree with B&L PC Solutions out of Long Island, New York, and I'm joined by some friends. Oh, I lost somebody. Hold on.
Oh,
There he
we're
is. And I'm joined here by,
We're trading places now.
I guess so.
Brandon Bowers
right.
with Eisenhower Managed Technology Services out of South Florida.
And I am Dave Groot with WinStar Technologies in Culpeper, Virginia. And Brandon restarted that connection so that he could move up into second slot there. I see how that works.
All right, guys. So today we're going to talk about, just the some of the misconceptions with data backup and people thinking that data backup is their cybersecurity policy, their business continuity policy, their disaster recovery policy, and they're just dumping data to the cloud, and that's um, their solution. And more often than not, that's far from the truth. As we know, data backup, traditional data backup years ago used to be you archive to tape, rotate your tapes, and then take full images and go through a whole process. And it still is a full-time job for a lot of people today. But the technology has changed so much, and for cybersecurity insurance policies, they require certain things in place. And we're seeing that with these questionnaires that come across, that people are just not in compliance with where they need to be. So Dave, back up to a local NAS device or to a cloud service. Um, what are the, for the small business with 20 people and a couple of servers, what are the risks there with just doing an offsite backup or just a dump to a NAS and offsite?
So the biggest risks, I would say, is lack of encryption, or maybe on the other side, too much encryption, right? Like if you get hit by ransomware and you have a NAS sitting on a network that is receiving the backup from any of these devices locally, that typically means it's accessible by the machine. So if the machine gets encrypted or infected with a ransomware virus, that means it will see that network share and encrypt your backups right along with it. On top of that, they're not encrypted sitting there by themselves so that nobody else can read them in a good way, which is a compliance requirement, right? Your data needs to be encrypted at rest and in transit. So anything locally available on those types of things doesn't have any security really built into it. It's just it's a place. And if one thing gets ruined, so does that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other thing about some of those dummy devices is that I'm saying dummy device. Some of them have a little smarts in them, but if you're just replicating, like you just have it configured, replication job, anything that hits that device is going to the cloud, which I've seen plenty of times. And you run into the situation where there is ransomware. That device is local, and based on the security configuration, like you said, Dave, the ransomware can now infect the backup. Well, what happens to your cloud backup? It just
It
replicates
sinks,
over with
right?
encrypted data, and everything gets ruined. So there's definitely more thought process that you need to think about when it comes to that sort of implementation.
Right. I mean, when it comes to true backup, I think one of the biggest benefits, take away the cybersecurity benefit from it, but it's just the fact that you have those points in time, right? Those incremental points in time you can go back to get a data. And I know it's not often that that needs to happen, but when you potentially are, in a uh, situation where you need to have a legal hold, or there's discovery necessary, or if you want to see the state of something at a particular time versus what it is today, how do you know if you're made whole after a breach, if you don't have something that's historical to look back at and compare to. A backup isn't just a copy. A backup is literally a plan, right? It's a backup.
Well, I think people mix up backup and thinking that I have backup, so now I have continuity
Yeah.
as well, and they're
Yeah.
two very different things. Like when I think of the cost of backup or risks around backup, and usually when we're having a conversation with a customer, is that, well, hey, yeah, we got this backup solution, um, and why do we need something else? Because in the past, what you wanted an image-based backup, right? And you wanted something that could restore quickly, but nowadays, what is quick, is being back up and running in a day, okay? Because you have so much data, it's going to take that amount of time to restore, or do you need a continuity solution? Like that's usually a big cost, the cost of downtime. Like how long is it going to take me from the point where we've got an issue to actually being able to restore and be back up and running and functional?
Yeah, and what does that mean? Because if you're just doing backup and you have, let's say, again, aside from the bad actors and the ransomware and stuff like that, you have a hardware failure, right? And there's, oh, I have all my stuff, we're good. Okay, you're good till when? Do we have replacement hardware? Do we have to procure hardware? Do we have to build something? I mean, so now you're talking days, potentially weeks of getting back up, and then moving that data from your local backup to that device. And so there's zero continuity there, right? I mean, it's just, your downtime is immeasurable if you're paying staff that can't get to anything. So there's a couple of
It's the
layers there too.
it's the perfect storm right now too,
Yeah.
because try and get a server in a week right
Hmm.
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and when you're talking about small business, right? I mean, like when their entire staff is down because the server is not working, right? That does hit the bottom line. That
It does.
cost is immeasurable, just in lost productivity, much less opportunity for more revenue.
Yeah. So what should be part of your business continuity solution is actually having continuity in there and having some measurable recovery steps for a multiple, a bunch of different scenarios, whether it be local failure, corruption, ransomware, site failure, and one solution can take care of all that for you. And they're not expensive, and they're not, there's a bunch of different vendors that can accomplish this, but there's also the misconception that, and I spoke to somebody this morning, we're doing a migration to the cloud, and SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, building all that out, and then I'm adding the backup piece to it. And he's like, no, we don't need that. And I'm like, no, you do. You have, well, it's in the cloud. That's all backed up. I said, well, no, that is, there's redundancy built in there. There's resiliency. I said, but there's no backup. I said, there's, you have corrupt data. You have corrupt data. I said, there's no, so you have to understand that the cloud also needs to be treated no differently. I mean, maybe differently functionality wise, but the approach needs to be identical to what you're doing for local server backup.
Yeah, I mean, it clearly states in the Microsoft agreement that they do not provide backup
Right.
for your data, that you're responsible for that. So if you're talking about their cloud environment, you certainly need to be backing that up. There's more to a backup than actually that part of it. It's the ability to monitor it and to test it and to validate it and make sure that it is taking place and that it's clean and that at the time I'm going to need it, it's going to serve its purpose, right? Every business has a different threshold. So certainly we can talk about recovery time objective or recovery point objective, or how far back, or what do we need? What can we lose? How much time can we lose before it's very painful? All those things are important, but once you decide that, right, then you got to put that process in place and you got to make sure it's taking place the way you expect it. And by the way, if you're in the medical industry, for sure, go back and look at your policies, because I can almost promise you 6 out of 10 people listening to this podcast, their policy still reflects tape and the fact that those tapes need to be circulated and restored, taken off site. And that is what was doing, for a long time there, but almost guarantee you that policy has not been changed and updated to fit
You know,
today's needs.
it's actually funny because you could have the best solution in place, but if you're not doing some of the checks around it, it could be as
doesn't
good as
matter.
having anything else. I was I was doing some research for a presentation. I did a webinar on Monday, and one of the things as I was doing research, I pulled up the most recent IBM report in terms of like data breach costs. And the third largest cause for a larger or increased cost is just cloud misconfiguration, not
Mhm.
properly configuring whatever
Yeah.
software system you had. And to me, I add on to that when we're talking about backup is that like everything always works when you first set it up right with a computer, but a week later something stops working. Like that's just the nature of
Yeah.
IT. And so if somebody's not testing those backups, validating that there's actually like data there, doing a restore, or even having the conversation. I don't remember if it was you, Brian, or David that just mentioned, but like figuring out, hey, if we do get hit with ransomware, like what is our next steps? Or if we have a hardware failure, like what's going to be the plan and what should we expect in terms of how quickly can we be back up? And I find that if you don't have that conversation, we've got a very big misalignment in understanding of like what my customers think is going to happen versus what is really going to happen realistically.
Yeah, for sure.
I spoke with the prospect a couple of days ago and was just generally going through a very basic security assessment questionnaire. And in conversation, it was, do you use multi-factor authentication? And the answer was, well, some of them do, but those are the only people who are sending sensitive data. And then, okay, so are you sending these types of data via email? Well, yes. And we used to be able to type encrypt and it would encrypt the email, but I don't know if that works anymore. And then the other person on the call is, well, no, now it's a button, but I'm not sure if it's set up or if it's working.
Yeah.
So then the next one is, do you have a backup? Well, yeah, such and such says they're doing it. And if he says he's doing it, then I take his word that he is. Have you seen any tests of the backup? Is there no? I'm sure if they say they're doing it, they're doing it. That's the general consensus of how people are acting and feeling. Uh, and I know that they are with the best of intentions, right? But that's just not how it goes. It's not. That's a misconception. You can't. You gotta look. You gotta pay attention.
Yeah, I think as easy as it is for people to work in this, whether they're still in a hybrid environment or they're fully remote or traveling a lot, back to travel, and as easy as it is with the cloud services to get to their data from anywhere at any time and just live and work in that moment, they have to realize that in the event something does happen, we need to live up to your expectations and performance the same way in the event. So it's not any easier for it's actually a lot harder for us today to manage and really entrust in a business continuity policy and enforce it than it was years ago, because I have one guy here that every single month, every endpoint on every backup unit is tested by him and documented and marked and sent to the client every month, so it's like, and that's and then every business should in some capacity have a business continuity policy that aligns with all this. And we check off the boxes that we're testing it every month, but every 6 months at a minimum. I mean, once a year at a minimum, but the recommendation is every 6 months. Let's test it. Let's test the policy. Let's shut off your servers and see how quickly we can have you up and looking at data from this morning. Can we do that? But and if we can't, is that okay? Or if we
Right.
can't, let's fix why we can't, document it, and then retest. It's
Right.
organic. It's not one and done. Believe me, we do it all the time, and we're constantly changing and tweaking.
Yeah, the stakeholders got to constantly be included in that, right?
Yeah,
They have
absolutely.
to understand what those rules are because they go based on perception. And then when something happens, when an incident occurs, they're caught off guard. They're not prepared for it because they think it's, oh, no big deal, it'll come right back. And it's like, oh no, that's a 3-day process. And they're like,
Yeah,
whoa.
yeah.
So yeah, it's got to be definitely clearly
There
stated.
needs to be buy-in again. If you're not using a true business continuity solution, really consider your risks and your in the event something does happen. get the buy-in from above. If you don't have, again, like anything else that we try to talk to our prospects or clients about, get the C-level people in there, have the conversations with them, get the buy-in, have them understand the risks. When you put that in front of them and you say, listen, I talked to somebody this morning that does not have a cybersecurity policy, insurance policy. And so I'm introducing them to a mutual contact that we have. And I told them straight out, you're gonna be denied coverage because you don't have these things in place. So, you need to start with that. And it's not a lot of money. It just needs to be a line item on the budget that's just there. And they have to have the buy-in from above.
Can we just take a second to kind of explain the difference between, because we've sort of mentioned the terminology, but we haven't really explained the difference, like backup versus continuity. What is the difference? Like, who wants
So
to take that?
continuity is really relating to how much disruption is in the business process and flow due to a catastrophe with data, whatever that is, right? A server goes down, you lose data, you have a weather event, people are working remote, it isn't accessible. And so the continuity is the ability to keep that business moving in the same direction with the absence of that information, and then keep it whole and bring it back with no loss or zero, as little loss as possible. A backup is, guys, it's what we do after you crash. Back in the 80s, we used to tell everybody you backed up. Okay, backing up is still good because, it's how I can self-serve me, right? If I have a backup of my files, it's a lot easier for me to restore them when I make a mistake and I delete something. But if it's, some kind of outside element or catastrophe, I'm kind of out of the game if I don't have continuity in running the business. And when it comes to the very simple and most basic principles of cybersecurity, it's the CIA, right? The confidentiality, the integrity, and the accessibility of data. And so that all ties into backup.
It's the same, we see these executives that come to us and they lost their iPhone or their iPad, and they just, what do? I got to get a new one. Okay. So what was you're backing up to iCloud, right? That's all. No. Okay. Well, now you have nothing, so they understand the importance of even a device, all your pictures, all your, everything is on there. If you're not configured properly at that level, it's the same thing. It's no different. Now you just lost everything. Are you going to get those photos back? No. So that's gone. So when they see something like that and you equate it to the business side of things, it's no different. It's just everyone is so dependent with the Internet of Things. Everything is connected these days. Everything has a purpose and an IP address and is online, and it just has. You lose that, your ring cameras go out. Your whatever it is, you have nothing. You can't get to anything. You can't see anything. Right? There's no continuity in that. So it's kind of like everyone is experiencing this at some level on a personal level, but the business side needs to be focused, aligned, and be able to resume in the event that something is lost, stolen, corrupt. And that's, like David said, that's the continuity piece. And then one level beyond that is a site failure. You have a flood or a fire in your building. Backup is not going to do shit for you in those situations. You're done. If you don't have anything, any type of, and there's plenty of products out there, but these are conversations that you need to have with your IT people and understand what happens if this building, the pandemic was a great test for a disaster scenario where you have a building that's inhabitable, but it's still up and running. Okay, so now we have everyone remotely working. Do we have the proper tools in place for that? That is sort of a continuity policy, right? Site failure is the only way to really do that is to test it twice a year, make sure that you can shut down and have people test and make sure that they can get to their data. But more often than not, it's going to be a reactive situation unless you have a business continuity policy in place that you can look at and say, here's what we do. Our building is gone. Let's go to number 1 and test it 1 through 10, have everybody sign off on it. And that needs to be done. I mean, and then listen, you're going to feel, you're going to be that person that has the only generator at your house on the block when you're down for 2 weeks without power. It's the same thing, you know.
You know, so you mentioned a couple times like this isn't expensive. I agree with you when you look at the cost of downtime, of what the continuity is going to bring you, being able to stay working and functional versus having a company of 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 people down, not able to function. Like it's huge. And it's a drop in the bucket at the end of the day when you really look at that. But the first thing that comes up when we look at continuity, service, or platform pricing versus historical backup, they looked at buying, hey, I bought the software and an appliance for 2 grand, 3 grand, whatever it was, and I didn't buy anything again for 5 years. And now I need to pay $1,000 a month for this or whatever it is. How do you get around those conversations, or how can we get people to think and understand that, like, there's a better way? And yeah, it seems like there's more of an operating cost, like that's hitting your credit card or something
Yeah.
every month, but it's really more of like an insurance, because when you need it,
It's there.
it more than pays for itself, right?
Yeah.
But how do you guys have those conversations?
Well, it's hard because you're talking about something that could be $100 a month versus something that could be $1,500 a month,
Right.
and or somewhere in between. Those are hard. It can be hard conversations to have, but we are relentless, guys. We don't offer anything else. This is and listen, sign here if we're not going to be managing this solution for you. I will still support you, but then when it comes to this piece, that's going to be a box that you're going to have to acknowledge every year that you're not going to go with what we're recommending. And we have one client that we don't manage backups for out of all of them, and everyone else that we manage backups for is under a business continuity plan. I mean, it's just it's one of those conversations that you have to have the right people in the room, right? And there are calculators out there that can show you, listen, here's your staff, here's your time, here's 3 days downtime. It's going to cost you, $75,000. You're telling me that the 12 grand a year is not worth the 3 days of downtime?
So I was going to say, in answer to your question, Brandon, that's the same kind of conversation, exactly like what you're saying there, Brian.
Yeah.
Is, I think if you compare what we're proposing as business continuity in terms of backup right this moment and the cost that's involved in that, the monthly ongoing, whatever that might be, if you look at the actual costs for your own in-house on-premise solution that is similar to what we might offer, I don't know that they are that much different. When you're talking about just infrastructure, you're talking about, we'll go as silly as electric costs and everything else, but okay, now we need staff that knows how to do it. So that's ongoing training. And then I need people to actually pay attention to it. And then they got to go in and they got to test it. And so if I'm doing all those things and I want to save money that way because I have this stellar IT team in my company that can take care of it, fine. Most small businesses don't. And that's why it costs a couple of bucks.
You want to, like, what we do is we portray, we're giving you white glove service. That's what you're getting. The concierge service, whatever you want to call it, but you're all in with us, and we're doing the testing, the implementation, the follow up. We're letting you know, and they see it. I mean, it's time to, guys. It's time to do it. But let's schedule a test. Let's or if we have a failure with something that on one of our monthly tests that this thing's blue screening on test. Let's address that, document it, and then revisit it next month. But it's you have to, it's a solution. It's not a product, right? It's not a set it and forget it, buy it, and then you're good. It's a solution that needs to be maintained, managed, and just like anything else in technology, it's because it will fail, right? A guy this morning tells me it's been 18 years he's been there and they've never had an issue. I said, well, you're just waiting on the when. I said, it's not the, I said, it's just when. Hasn't happened yet. Okay, but it will. There's no way around that. So.
All right. So what do we want to say to end it up?
I think Brandon could probably close it out for us.
I'm all about number 3 for sure.
Yeah. So I think based on everything we were discussing, number one, you want a continuity solution. You don't want just a backup solution.
Or if I may just say, have a
Yeah.
continuity solution. And stay with me. I'll let you go here in a second. But if you're not going to have one, at least understand what the impact is to you if you have an
Yes.
incident.
Have the
Okay, good.
conversation and understand what
Right.
is that going to mean for us in terms of next steps if we need to recover, for sure. Number two, whether you have backup or continuity, make sure somebody's testing it.
Yeah.
Because on both sides of the fence, you need it configured properly. You need it tested on an ongoing basis, because at some point something's going to fail, and you don't want that point to be after you've had an incident happen and determine, man, we can't get our data back. This one ties to testing. Walk through, create an incident response plan and walk through it with your provider, with some of the key stakeholders in your business. Understand, hey, if we're hit with this event, some people call it a tabletop. You can have like a mock tabletop walkthrough. Hey, we just got hit with ransomware yesterday. What's the first thing we need to do? What do we do next? What do we do next? And that really drives home the experience and the feeling that you sometimes go through, without having so much pressure. So you can logically think through it and then update that documentation. And then I think the last thing for me is, at a minimum, everything we talk about, we're always talking about security and we're talking about backups right now, but you need to have a cyber insurance policy in place. At some point, one of these things may fail. You want that last line of defense to help you.
Agreed.
Really.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the cyber insurance, okay, you think insurance and you think, okay, my claim's paid, all my losses are taken care of, but maybe that is important, but I think the more important part of it is the resources they can bring to the table immediately to assist you, both in the, deciding how and when and why, and then what am I doing to go forward and all that other stuff. Definitely have professionals ready to go on your team first with a cyber insurance policy, and then a good IT company.
Yes. Well said.
Great.
All right, guys.
Yep.
Thanks
Have a great
again.
day.
We're here every Wednesday, 1:30 Eastern, and hope to see you guys next week. You all have a good day.
Topic
Y'all
to
too.
BD.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Take care, guys.
Cool.